Never mind, we're good. The real question will be, will my dog behave today? I fed him lunch. I don't think there will be any UPS deliveries. That's a big one. And the door is open so he can go outside and sun himself in the patio. Clearly, he runs the house for sure, 200%.
I think that's everybody's dream, right? When we're
Yes.
on a Zoom call, no oops for the kids or the dogs or anything like that.
Yeah.
All right, we have some people rolling in.
Already coming in.
Yes.
Good to see everybody.
Absolutely.
Great.
Stacy, glad you could make it. Hi, Linda. How are you? Vince, Jay, good morning. Hey, Justin even could make it. Look at this. Wow.
Wow.
We're rolling.
Yeah, this is great.
So Kayla, you said there was how many people?
We had I think it was like 39 that registered. So
Very nice.
Okay.
yeah,
Terrific.
We'll see who can actually make it today. That'd be great.
Yep.
I'm gonna make this a little bigger. All right.
Kayla, you're too smart, I swear.
Yeah, all this stuff is second nature to you, right?
I know.
I know.
I had trouble just signing on. Come on.
It's true. Michael, you've been using Zoom though quite a bit, correct? So that's been
Yeah.
so you've been used to the medium
Well,
to this point.
yeah. I mean, I haven't done any kind of like big group meetings or anything. I was going to use breakout rooms for the first time, and then we didn't because
I
we had
see.
2 people.
Yeah,
on
Kayla's
one
the
site.
mistress of breakout rooms. She can break us out and do all kinds of good things. But
Breakout rooms are fun.
yep.
Oh, I thought I saw somebody raise their hand, but I think they took it down.
So on my screen, I only see the 4 of you. Is that
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is a webinar.
okay?
So that we won't see anybody, but we can see their names popping up in the participants list.
Can you do that, Michael?
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Yeah. Yay.
Ah, there we go.
Oh,
Nice.
Oh my God, Jay.
Chris is here. It's terrific.
It's a good thing when I pulled this up. I now know who like
Right.
You're
Kind
right.
of know who's here.
who knows all kinds of dirt on me. My God.
I know. Jeez. That's fantastic. Oh, Linda's raised her hand, right? Linda has a question. Uh-oh.
Oh, God.
And Jay has a question. I think
He
he
just
agrees,
did that.
Michael. Yeah,
He
I
just
think he says, yes, indeed, I do have dirt on you. And so I think that's what he was indicating there.
No. It's a good thing
My
I looked
goodness.
at this. It's a good thing I
It's
looked
a
at
tough audience, and they're just getting warmed up. They're just coming
I
in.
know.
God.
Man.
I'm reading about the French Revolution. It's feeling very, very similar.
Yeah, I know, that's
the
right.
crowd is out there.
Uh-huh. They've got their knives out. You've got to be careful with this group.
Nobody has a guillotine, do they?
Mm-mm. No, absolutely not.
All right. It looks like it is time for us to go and get started. We have quite a few people that have got logged in, but the number is not moving too much at this point. So just for everyone that's here, thank you all so much for coming and spending the time with us today. As you can tell from our already banter at the beginning, this is going to be fun and we're going to learn something in the process. So that's going to be great. Just thank you all so much. If you have any specific questions, there is a Q&A box that you can use to place them in. If you put them in the Q&A box, I can actually mark if they're answered or share different things, and it helps with the recording as well. Or you can put them into the chat as well. So the Q&A box is my preference, but I'm not going to get mad at you, I promise. And then Tom, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Absolutely. Kayla, thank you. And thank you so much for all your efforts as we make this pivot in crazy times and challenging times. You have been tremendous resource to Parker Center in helping us embrace this technology and move forward with it. And I think, as your words would be best, thrive in this environment. So thank you. I want to thank Robin Otten, who can't be here today with us. We're going to speak about this afterwards, but she's got some things going on with her family, some health stuff. I want to thank Robin, tremendous job she does as our executive director, and all the members of the board who've been super supportive in this. Let's talk very briefly about what we are up to here in Vision 2020. We're trying to be efficient, timely, and be a resource and of service to family businesses regionally. What Parker Center is really the premier resource in the Southwest to family business. And this is our second meeting in Vision 2020, where we're trying to provide information that really helps business owners make decisions, move forward, and thrive in this challenging time. We have a panel format, so we're going to have an interview first and then a presentation. And I want to just briefly introduce our presenters and explain who they are and give a very brief background before we jump into this. So Michael Podolny is a consultant with over 30 years experience working with business and family business in the Southwest. I've had the pleasure of knowing him about 15 years, and we've collaborated on a number of projects together. Michael's going to bring very unique insight in terms of how to strategically plan and what things should family businesses be doing as the environment and the world has changed. So we're going to have a Q&A and a discussion there. He's got some very interesting thoughts. He also has a very interesting project going on across the oceans in Ghana that he's going to talk very briefly about how that can help family business. And then all of you should by this point know, or most of you should know, Dr. Edward Monte. Dr. Edward Monte is on our board. He has also presented in the first version of this about 2 weeks ago. And he has a tremendous wealth of contacts and experience with family business. He is a therapist and brings a very unique perspective. So he is going to add to the presentation that he did a couple weeks ago, and we're very excited to hear what he has to say of how family businesses are coping in this new environment, how we move forward together. So with that, Michael, we are going to start with you and get right to it. First off, thank you for taking the time today to be with us and talk about your thoughts. So I'm going to get into it as it is efficient and try to be a good use of time. You have worked with a lot of businesses and family businesses over the years. First thing out the gate, the world has changed. You're talking to a lot of people. Specifically, what are the biggest changes and challenges that you're seeing when you talk to clients right now and you talk to family business owners?
I would say the biggest change that I've seen is that the feeling of hopelessness. There's a narrative that's going on nonstop on media and government, and the narrative is, we don't know, it's going to be horrible, and we don't know, and you should be very scared because we don't know, and it just keeps going on and on and on. And what this has done is it's created a sense of paralysis. Now, I would venture to say that this is not the bubonic plague, okay? And even the bubonic plague did not end civilization. There was a really great article a couple of weeks ago talking about London in, I think it was 1666, had just gone through the plague, had lost 30% of its population, then followed by the Great Fire, and that like 3 years afterwards, it was booming and everything was returning, etc. So as a colleague of mine, Kelly Stanhope, says, we have completely been overwhelmed with this narrative. And so we've stopped any kind of possibility thinking, like, what could we do? What can we do? How can we do things? And it's having a really terrible effect because it's stopping people from really trying to think things through, because everyone's saying, oh, I can't possibly make any plans now because we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if this is going to happen. We don't know if that's going to happen. So I'm not going to do anything, which is about the worst thing you can do in a crisis management situation.
So very interesting perspective off the bat. And as you're a strategic planner and you've had a lot of experience in private equity, putting deals together, selling businesses, et cetera, you make a very interesting point that this is probably the worst possible time to stop planning, right? And to stop thinking about your family business and what you're doing. So from a planning perspective, what do you suggest right now that people do to evaluate their business and their situation to move forward versus to get stuck in the paralysis
Sure.
that you're talking about?
Sure. Well, I mean, this is probably, I'm thinking everybody's doing this, or they should be doing this. Of course, the first thing is, what's my cash position? What's going on? You know, how much business do I think is dropping off? Where are we at from a perspective of, you know, cash? You know, different industries are in very different scenarios, right? If you're in oil and gas right now, you are like in, like, you know, construction was in 2009, where we're saying like, well, we may have to reinvent ourselves just to stay alive. Maybe we can't stay alive. Type of thing. Conversely, all right, I have some people who are supplying home building who are doing great, who are having some of their best years ever. I have people who in market research who are having, you know, great years. So from a planning perspective, number one, I think you have to look at who are my customers, who are my clients, how are they being affected by this? Are we in, you know, sectors that are going to be somewhat, you know, positively affected, negatively affected, et cetera. And then that's going to determine which sort of major pathway you're going to go down. Are we going to go down one that's more of the crisis management mode? Or are we going to go down one that's on the more positive side? There was, in fact, a great article in a private equity journal that comes out, you know, like the daily stuff, where one of the private equity people had created kind of a risk paradigm put out there and talking about where private equity is going to look to put money now, because they look at having there being great opportunities.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point. Expand on that. You and I had talked about that, and there are businesses who may be thinking, hey, we were in the process of selling, or there's succession going on in a family business. And because this crisis has happened, there's no way we could do that. There's no way we could sell the business. Private equity is not going to be interested in us, and we should just put that process on hold. Talk about that for a minute. Is that true, number one? And really, how do you position yourself with that situation going on?
Well, let's talk about the overall, you know, I'm going to call it underlying financial reality that you and I talked about a couple of days ago, Tom. All right. If you're making money today, if you're making money and you are continuing to do well, and you are thinking about some sort of liquidity event, you know, maybe it's a division, maybe it's not everything you own in the family, et cetera, and you are over $1 million in EBITDA, you are going to have an incredible window of opportunity in a year to 2 years. And here's why. Private equity hasn't stopped going. Private equity has, what, Tom, trillions of dollars that they've raised. And private equity is always on a short time fuse. If I just raised a fund of $200 million and I closed that fund on January of 2020, I have 10 years to get that money out. I've got to get it all out. I've got to get the investment, and then I got to sell everything off so I can return the money in 10 years. So now we've created a 1-year hiatus. All these funds now are like, okay, well, we can't do anything right now, but I've still got all that money. I still got to get it invested. I still have to make a rate of return in order to hit my goals. So what's going to happen a year from now? A whole bunch of industries that you might have invested in, you're not going to invest in. If you are, am I going to invest in a firm that does, let's say, supplies materials to the aerospace industry? Am I going to invest in a company that cleans airplanes, you know, and does that kind of thing? Am I going to invest in an industry, you know, in oil and gas? There's whole industry sectors that are now off the plate, but there's the same amount of money there that needs to be invested. So what happens when we have the same amount of money chasing a fewer number of deals, quality deals? We're going to have valuations going to go up. We're going to have multiples go up. So there will be this window of opportunity, I don't know how long it'll last, a year, 2 years, et cetera, where instead of the 4 to 5 times EBITDA that has always been the case for private equity, it's going to go up to 5, 6, 7, depending on what your size and capability is. Now, if you're a family business that wants to do a recap, let's say you want to get some of your equity off, but you want to keep people in, you want a second generation to have the chance to come in, but you don't want to have to finance them, there's going to be a tremendous opportunity. So, but to hit that opportunity, you got to start planning now. You got to start doing all the things that you need to posture your business to be attractive to that particular market now. So when the players start coming back in, you're going to be able to take advantage of that.
Okay, interesting, because I think a lot of people right now out in the marketplace really think that everything's frozen, that opportunity's gone based on all the bad news they're hearing. Let's shift a minute back to what you talked about with crisis management, and then we'll go back to the opportunities for companies going forward. Talk to us to the family business that really is in crisis, that their market has gone away from them. They are in an industry really affected by this. Travel, restaurants. We've got a ton of restaurants in New Mexico, and people are really concerned about what happens there. So let's back up. As a crisis manager and a strategic planner, how do you kind of address that? What advice do you give to the business owner at this point that really doesn't know if they have an ongoing business concern and if their customers are going to come back to them?
Well, this is like, this is the polar opposite, okay, of what
Yes.
we were just talking about. When you're in crisis management, you're not strategic planning. You have to be totally in the now, totally what do we need to do to kind of get forward. And there are some very basic rules, related to crisis management. If you're looking at a 20 or 30% drop in revenue, you can probably cut expenses and stay alive. But as we saw in 2009 with the construction industry, if you're looking at a 70 or 80% drop in revenue, you can't cut expenses. You have to completely reinvent your company. You have to say that if I'm going from 50 million to 10 million, all right, in revenue, I have to assume like all bets are off. I take a totally clean sheet of paper. How much staffing do I need? What overhead will allow me to exist at $10 million? And if you can do that, and if those numbers work, you execute that plan. And people did that in 2009 and they survived. And people who did not do that did not survive. If they kept holding on and thinking like, oh, I can incrementally cut an expense here, et cetera. No, you don't have the time to do that. If you look at these numbers and they don't work, you need to shut down. This is one of the hardest decisions people have to make. Sometimes it's just not going to work. And the first loss is the best loss. And I can tell you from personal experience, not taking the first loss is a horrible decision. All right. So, I would say, particularly, let's say a lot of our smaller restaurants, I mean, we have a lot of micro, nano businesses here. Even though the National Restaurant Association has put out some phenomenal guidelines of, what you need to do. A good friend of mine is Art Kaplan, who owns Wex, who has done a phenomenal job of developing a whole process and procedure, but he's got a lot of resources to plug into this to make this happen. As a small restaurant, you may not be able to do that. Rather than fight and maybe bleed, red ink because you're only able to open at 25% or whatever, you might be better off to shut down, wait a year or two, reopen with something new, once you know what the new environment is. But oftentimes our ego gets in the way of our good judgment because we've put so much of our innards into our business that to walk away from it is just really tough. But in times like this, you've got to sometimes you got to make really hard decisions in your own best interest.
So Michael, I think really interesting and helpful point, and a lot of people don't want to talk about that, of making a business decision versus the emotional decision, even though your whole family identity, and I know Edward will talk about this, could be wrapped up in your business. What are the resources? So let's just say you are a restaurant owner at this point, right? And you're in this tough position. What resources, where do you go to determine, am I a viable interest? Let's say I'm not good at, modeling or spreadsheets, things like that. How do I do that? Where do I go? What would be your advice of people to kind of reach out and get help so it's not such an emotional process, given the struggle at this point?
Actually, there are a ton of resources out there that are all sort of like gearing themselves up to help. I mean, you have people like the incubators. You have people like West, like the Santa Fe Business Incubator. You have SCORE, which has really put itself out there in terms of its resources, et cetera. There's a group that Trusted Advisor Network that I belong to. Then we've created our own initiative called Jumpstart Business Southwest, which is going to be collaborative. the first thing you need to, I would say to anybody, is to find somebody who is a triage specialist, sort of. I mean, there are certain people who have experience and understand in a crisis, just like in a medical crisis, you've got to go through things very quickly and figure out what's most critical. Second thing usually is cash. Do I have the cash to get through? Can I have the cash to get through? And then there is like, about 3 or 4 things that are kind of all simultaneous if I've got enough. One of this has to do with, and I'm sure Dr. Monte will address this, the mental health of the owner themselves. Because if the owner doesn't have their shit together, no one's going to be able to succeed in the organization. Number 2 is having some sort of strategic sense, like how are things changing? If my restaurant can only work at 25% capacity, how do I get the customers in? How do I turn them in? How do I maintain optimum? How do I, do I do some marketing? And marketing and messaging becomes a whole part of this as well. Communicating with people, being proactive, letting people know what's going to happen in terms of what's going on. And then engaging the rest of your people to make sure that they are the right ones that are there. As my friend, Mr. Kaplan, I'm going to refer to him again because if any of you know him, he's a phenomenal business person. This is a great opportunity to look at your staff and say, who do I really want to keep? Who are the A, B, and C players? And guess what? It's the time to keep the A players, in this particular situation. So I don't know if that was clear enough, Tom, or if I kind of rambled about.
No, I think very clear. One thing we're interested to at Parker for all family businesses is talk about kind of cross-pollination and make sure that we're not just stuck in our own silo, and that business owners are able to get resources from really a wide swath of these groups. Briefly talk about what you're doing with Project Jumpstart and Trusted Advisor Network so that people hear that, so that they know they have other places to go to get information as the economy restarts. Give us kind of a picture of that.
Sure. About a month ago, we were looking at what was rolling down, and again, looking at this narrative that is just so negative and paralyzing, and saying that if we didn't do something positive, that our economy prospects are not very good in terms of any kind of bounce back. So, Trusted Advisor Network is an organization of professionals that have a give to get philosophy and work together and collaborate. So we mentioned to them that we brainstormed and said, we're really good, but we're really sort of disjointed. And also seen that there was a huge amount of information coming down the pike. Like if you look at your email inbox, like every day, some advisor saying something, whatever, but it wasn't coordinated and it wasn't put into, a usable form. So what we did was we said, we need to make it simple. We need to make it straightforward. We need to make it actionable. And so we took a number of our people had the skills we felt were the most appropriate, and we did a content distillation. So we did 23 interviews with people in 9 days. I actually made use of, you were mentioning my group in Ghana. So we have, this is not apropos to this, but I have a venture where we're helping sex workers get out of sex work by teaching them how to be virtual assistants. And it was just getting off the ground. And so I volunteered them to do this project. It was a little bit of a Chinese fire drill. Now, there are people here who are not old enough to know what a Chinese fire drill is. So I suggested you put a Q&A to somebody who's over 50 who can explain to you what a Chinese fire drill is.
They're getting but Michael, you got to admit, they're getting a good lesson in the Chinese fire drill.
Oh, for sure.
Current situation. Yeah.
So anyway, so what we did is we were able to come down with these things I just mentioned, as that there was like 6 things that everybody needed to do. When we went out to places like SCORE, to NABO, to West, et cetera, we found their thinking was all the same. And we identified that the key thing was this triage portion. So what Jumpstart is going to try to do, hopefully starting in about a week to 2 weeks, our website will be up, and we'll be really promoting ourselves as being the people to talk to as a portal. And then, hey, go to SCORE, let's figure out where to go, and where is the best resource for you, and mostly to get a narrative out there that yes, you can be in control. No, you are not a victim. let's start doing things to make things go in a positive direction.
Terrific. And Michael, we're going to transition. Time goes by very quickly in this format. And I think you did an excellent job of providing really an overview. But again, purposes of these Zoom chats for everybody is to provide resources to understand specifically where do you go and how do you get help. We have a website that's going to link this information. The other piece that's really important is that Michael is part of the Parker's referral network. Okay, so Parker Center has a referral network that if you need help with a particular specific issue, then we match a professional that can help you and can give you advice and talk to you one-on-one. The reality of this is that in the environment we're in, Zoom, webinar, conference call, we're not going to be able to get to the level of detail needed. So Michael's available if you want to talk to him offline. We have his contact information of how you can get a hold of him, learn more about Project Jumpstart. Michael, I'm sorry we didn't have more time to talk about Project Theodora in Ghana. I think we will get to that at some point, but Michael's running a really interesting nonprofit case in trying to get people in Ghana to help be virtual assistants, as he mentioned. I think that can be a help in this time. You've got a lot going on, Michael, so I want to thank you for taking the time. I think a ton of good information laid out in a very short period. Really, thank you. Stay around with us if you would, because we're going to take and answer some questions at the end of this after Edward talks to us about his thoughts. Fair?
Fair enough. Thank you, everyone.
Yep. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to switch gears a little bit, but I think talk about a lot of the same things. I briefly introduced Dr. Edward Monte. He doesn't need much of an introduction to this group, but Edward's going to walk us through to pair with what Michael has talked about with what is going on with family businesses and strategically, how do they handle the other side of this? Michael alluded to it a few times, but what about the mental health and how businesses and family members are relating and reacting to one another? How do we move forward on that front? Edward, thank you for everything you've done for us. We really really appreciate all your help in this and getting this Vision 2020 project off the ground. So I've got to say that. The floor is yours, and appreciate you being here and taking your time.
Thank you very much. My part of the conversation, I was putting it together and sort of feeling like Dr. Downer here. I think Michael is absolutely right. As I'm continuing to do a lot of consulting, what I found is two things. One is what Michael's saying, that people are putting things off. They're saying, well, why do we need to talk about the future and our dreams of the future? We're not sure if we're going to be around for the next 3 weeks. We're not sure if we're going to be alive. So that things have sort of stopped. What I've also noticed is in the first month of working with family businesses in the shutdown, they were pretty positive, actually. Some were even saying, you know, this is an awful thing, but for me and for our family and for the business, it's sort of a respite from a lot of the tension and the stress. So it felt like a little mini vacation. That's overstating, but it really wasn't as dire as it's now becoming. And what I've noticed is on a business side, people are putting things on hold and reacting to the fact that there is a pandemic, and therefore what business decisions can we make? On the other hand, they're underestimating the psychological effects this pandemic is having on them and everybody around them. I'm just amazed at how often I get, no, I'm fine, it's okay. And then what I'm noticing is bickering between family members, thinking about things, and for people that tend not to be very negative, it become more negative, a little bit more critical, a little more on edge. If something, I just had someone yesterday where the schedule was off by about 15 minutes. A sister didn't show up for a Zoom call and the brother went ballistic. And it was like, it was 15 minutes. She's got 3 kids, give her a break. But it was suddenly just a huge thing. And when calling him on it to say, look, are you okay? Immediate response is, I'm fine. I just, you know, the schedule's bothering me. Well, actually, the schedule is not what's probably bothering you. So if we go to the next slide and look at the fact that there is, Caleb, oh, thank you. There's a number of statistics coming out in terms of the disturbance that's happened in all of our lives and how we're experiencing stress, anxiety, depression to some extent. 1/2 of the population, at least, are finding that they're they're really struggling with their mental health at this point. It's very subtle. It's not something that's bringing people to their knees. I have a guy that says every morning he wakes up and he goes, oh, and he fill in the blank there in terms of the expletive he uses, but he said, I've never been like that. I jump out of bed, I'm fine. Now I open my eyes and the first thing out of my mouth is a 4-letter word. And then I shake my head and I get up and I start my day. What is that? I'm just tired of the new routine. So in the next slide, what you want to look at is really that for most people in this world, there's a threat of, or the loss of life and major financial security are the primary stressors. I would argue for our group right now, and for most of us, that is in part, yes, a major stressor for us, but not as much as the major population. So we dismiss the trauma that we're having. The owners of these businesses are saying, well, we'll survive. We'll be okay. We'll be on the other side. We're isolating. We're taking all the precautions. We probably won't get sick. We probably won't die. Therefore, we're not forced to be in a closed environment like lower income people are. So we'll probably survive it. And then they dismiss the fact that even if this is not as dire for us and others in this class, that it really doesn't exist when in fact it does. So the next slide just talks about how we have to look at that there's been 8 to 9 weeks now, guys, of loss of structure, schedule, routines, total interruption, that should say life. And your life is not what it used to be. And as Michael said, the idea that we don't know when it's going to end, when you look at trauma for people, and it's off, most of the research there is off of war victims, soldiers, Vietnam, Afghanistan, where, yeah, they may know what their tour of duty is, but for the most part, this will go on forever. And if you don't know when the trauma is going to end, then it heightens all of this loss. So that is one of the things that when all the professionals around you are saying, we don't know, that is increasing greatly our sense of loss, because all the things that we used to know about our life as it was is over, and we don't know when it's coming back and how and if. And that just raises attention. So in the next slide, what we want to do is look at the fact that we're now beginning to feel trapped and that there are fewer and fewer distractions. I know what I did in the first 4 weeks, apart from my work. I cleaned closets, I did the garden, I scrubbed, I did this, I did that. I'm sort of running out of those things. And now it's like, okay, how many times can I clean out my desk drawers? I mean, come on. So I'm now having to sit with every moment of, all right, how is today gonna look? And how can I find something other than my work? There's a slow, insidious sense of grief, depression, anxiety, and loss. And I want everyone on the call to take that seriously. There are things to do, but do not ignore that. You are getting crankier. You are getting more depressed. You are getting more anxious. We're not talking about clinical levels. We're just talking about shading. And that what we've tried is putting all these new things in place, and many of them we must do, and it's very positive to all of you, but it's just not the same or as good in the sense, like, will we ever be able to go back? Doing Zoom meetings is wonderful. We'll probably incorporate it going forward in our business, but having a Zoom meeting still doesn't quite compare to sitting in the same room. Having a Zoom dinner with your siblings is lovely, but really it's not like having them over to dinner. So that is in place. We're still dealing with losses. So what it then does is it taps everyone's personal trauma. Whatever your belief is, your most negative belief, the world is unfair, the other shoe will always drop, the good guys always lose, they're out there to get me, or my personal favorite, life is shit and we're all gonna die. So if that's what you think, that's where you're gonna go, because the overshadowing piece here is something horrible out of my control is happening. And before I know it, it just taps into whatever my worst fears are. So you should identify the best you can. What are some of your worst fears that you need to counter? But right now we're just talking about the negative side, which is what is getting tapped in your family? I have many families of trauma that are in family business, And this is a trauma nobody can get out of, but we can do things within until it changes. So what is getting triggered? The other thing, sorry for all of you over 50, if I could remember 50, I'd be happy. But for those of you 50 or over, we do not handle stress the way 30-year-olds do. And you have to know this. It really takes a toll on our bodies. We just don't recover the way we used to. And if you're well beyond 50, this is why you're more cranky, you're more exhausted, you don't know what you've done for the day, but at 9 o'clock at night, you can't keep your eyes open. It's stress. Now, what do we do about it? Most people will try to comfort ourselves with alcohol, drugs, food. But what you need to understand, and it's this short-term versus long-term, all of these things from, if you look at alcohol and marijuana, they're downers. Oh my God, we're already depressed and anxious. Why are you taking a downer? If you do other drugs that are, stimulants, great, but you're going to crash. If you use food or alcohol, which by the way is distilled sugar, your sugar rates are going to go up and down. And within 12 hours, you're going to have a bigger anxiety and depression crash than you have already. Not to say don't use comforting things like this, the whole drug thing we can talk about later, but the whole, food, alcohol, things that are societally said to be okay, in very much moderation. And I would even say try to pull back on them because they're feeding in long-term to stress and depression. And it just makes sense biochemically. We're not talking about addictions. We're just talking about normal usage. You eat a lot of sugar, you're going to feel terrible in 12 hours, worse than you do now. Next slide is probably 4 things that I really feel have to be addressed in our reflection piece of this presentation today by Parker Center. To reflect on it, really lean into the gaps in your ability to produce. You can't produce as much as you used to. Is that such a bad thing? And for most of you in family business, most of you owning family businesses, working 90 hours a week in a family business, you're really identified around your production. And if your production goes down, what does that have to say about you? And so people are beginning to really fear, who am I? Because I can't produce the way I used to. Can you lean into that and really savor some of the moments where you can be comforted and happy doing something other than producing, reading a good book, sitting, talking to your spouse, partner, child? Focus on positive interactions. Now is not the time to resolve toxic relationships. Can I just point that out? It's already too stressful. So let's not call your cousin that you hate and think you're going to work through it now. Just ignore them, back off, tell them you love them, you'll talk to them later. Focus on the relationships that are positive and good. There's enough loss right now. Do not try to do that. Try to be, as Michael said, positive and look at what's possible. That was so good, because I think right now everyone's telling us not much is possible. And here's a business person saying, no, there are opportunities. Here's a emotionally based psychological person saying, no, there are positive things out there. What are you enjoying in your day? Could you do more of that? What are the possibilities when things begin to even out that you're looking forward to right now? What are you learning now that will make you happy in the future? We've all talked about Zoom meetings are a pain, except for, gee, it's sort of cool to have a Zoom meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning with all of your coworkers rather than to rush through traffic to get there at 8 o'clock to have the same darn meeting when you can do it in your pajamas. Why not do that more often? So what are the things we're learning now that we can use later? Next slide would be World Health Organization, and this is in our website for you to go to. They have about 35 things to really look at, like minimizing listening about the COVID thing. TV goes on first thing in the morning, I'm listening to it, and finally I have to turn it off. I mean, enough already. I got it, it's bad. What else can we do? Protect yourself and others, support others, things of this, manage your mental health. Try to use good coping strategies, not alcohol, drugs, food only. Talking, try that. What a concept. Why don't you talk to the people around you about how you're feeling? Hang out with people. That is not determined by you only have a half hour and then you have to get back to work. Look at the stressors in your staff, your coworkers, your family business workers. Look at your children, people you're responsible for. Are you protecting them and finding ways for them to process their feelings? Don't ignore it. Has there been a meeting where you go, how are you all doing? Other than doing your business and your family business. When was the last time you asked your family members and employees, are you okay? How are you coping? Isn't this scary? It's scary for me. As parents, owners of a family business, your obligation is to have the people working for you to identify that you're as vulnerable as they are, but you will help them through it. Do not pretend you're fine, because they don't feel fine, and then they're going to feel crazy for not being you. So it's fine to say, I'm very nervous. I don't know what's going on, but we'll work on this together and I will lead you. But no, I'm as scared as you are. That's a very good model for children and for employees. Keep in regular contact with loved ones. The isolation is literally killing people. Suicide rates are up. So isolation is the last thing we need to do. So however you can do it, stay in touch, but stay safe and keep things in perspective. You know, Michael said, this will get over. We're all not going to die. It's pretty bad, but put in perspective. What's good? And I did a slide presentation. I want you all to know this is a new thing for me, which I hate, but I did it. So thank you. And there's the sunrise. So yay, very positive.
Thank you so much,
Sure.
Dr. Monte. Yeah, Tom, do you want to? First, real quick, this is the link here, the parkercenter.org/media. So this slide right here that Dr. Monte talked about from the World Health Organization, that resource is available to all of you. It's up on that website now. So now we do have some questions and some things that have come up. So Tom, did you want to say anything before we get going? You want to do questions first? You're muted, Tom. I can't hear you.
He is talking. I can see his lips moving.
Okay,
Oh, there, I finally got
There you
unmuted.
go.
I was going to go on for a good 30 minutes. No,
And it was your best work, Tom. It was
I know. I don't even know what I said. So first off, I think that the presentations have been terrific. There have been some really interesting things going on in the chat. And I didn't mention at the beginning, my fault. Parker Center has enjoyed a wonderful partnership with UNM's Anderson School for Business. Huge resource in this community. Stacy Sacco, who has been a tremendous friend and resource to the Parker Center over the years, is in chat providing the website that he hosts that has tremendous connectivity to all the topics we're discussing, resources as well. Kayla has put our website up that's going to have the ability to watch this, right? Video so that you can see this posted and have a place to go to get more resources. So as we jump in the Q&A, I know people will have to go at a certain point. We've got some great questions pending, but really want to mention that UNM's Anderson School and their tremendous professors and faculty can be really a great resource in this as well. So Stacy, thank you for putting that in the chat, and make sure to go check out that website, please. Kayla, there's some great questions pending, so run us through those. Where do you want to start?
Oh, I think that let's stick with Edward for now, and then we'll go back to Michael. How's that? So, we have a great question about, is guilt also a part of the equation that you're talking about? So guilt of not spending enough time at the office. Personally, it's guilt for, my son who is now sitting in front of me wondering when I'm going to be done with this webinar and how that's going. So I think finding that balance and what does that guilt look like? Edward, can you talk about that?
Well, it's one more thing you don't have control over. So I think always put it in context of the pandemic is something we have no control over. Therefore, anything we can do is positive, but we always feel like we're not doing enough, as though magically we can. You can only get to so many things, Kayla. And so at some point you have to say, this is all I can do. The guilt I would also talk about is for those on the call, for the most part, we're not the ones suffering at the degree that many people in this culture are. So then you feel sort of guilty that, I'm sitting here going, this isn't so bad. Well, I have the privilege of doing that. And it doesn't mean anything other than I'm at some point in my life, financial basis, where I can sit and go, okay, well, nobody's going to starve. Most people can't do that, and you do feel guilty. So what can you do for others? And that's part of it. What can you do for your employees? What can you do for the community? Get busy. There's a lot out there.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah, that's definitely, I think that I'm probably not the only one who have had that feeling of guilt. So Erin, thank you so much for such a great question. And then can we also talk about exercise? So this is a question that came in,
Yeah.
she can't underemphasize the benefit of exercise during these times and how it helps to release those negative, overwhelming feelings.
Absolutely. Whatever you can do to really raise your spirits and exercise outside the confinement piece and lack of movement on top of the increase of sugar intake and things like that. Not a medical doctor, but hey, knowing how good it feels to go for a long walk now in ways that it never was before, because there's also cabin fever it's getting out of. I can spend hours on the computer a day now and just to look up. I had a friend once say, if someone's depressed, just tell them to look up. If they're down, look up. And I thought it was this great metaphor because really get outside, move is an anecdote to the sitting and the just waiting. So yes, exercise obviously is a very important thing, particularly now.
Great. We have another question. From a psychological perspective, due to the mental stress related to the COVID, I'm finding that I need peace and quiet when I get home at night. Do you have any other suggestions to decompress from the issues that we face at work due to COVID?
The first thing is, why are you out? But let's put that aside. What do you mean you're coming home from work? I mean, what are you doing? But okay, the idea that when you're out and if you're running a family business, that you're taking care of others. For everyone on this call that's in that position, what you're really feeling is within the pandemic, you're doing what you can to make sure everybody's okay. And you will more than likely forget about yourself. So I absolutely, if you get home and you need time, you have to fight for that time more now than ever, because you have to take a break from giving to others. It's that, oxygen first and then hand it to the kid. So you've got to take care of yourself and you need that recoup at the end of the day. Also, you may consider staying home now and then, but that's a whole other topic. Who's out, really?
Kayla, yeah. Can I take this one? It was a great question from Brett for Michael. Is that okay? I might have been muted again, so you never know. I got to make sure I haven't been. Michael, I think Brett has a really interesting question on technology. And you are a person who has embraced technology largely, even though you might, I know you've said you're a Luddite. I don't buy that at all. You totally embrace technology. How does technology play a role in this? And how have you been implementing that and adopting it to make yourself more efficient and clients more efficient during this time?
Well, I don't know if I'm exactly the guy to answer the technology question. I mean,
perfect guy.
This whole idea of working virtually, I think can really bring in a lot of different resources that you would normally not be able to use and do. I mean, I'll just use the example of I talked about the project where we did the 23 interviews. Okay, so here I have a group in Ghana, all right, and that I'm being able to get because they're available at a low cost. I mean, people aren't going to sit down and write their knowledge down, right, for 23 people. And we were able to use Zoom, we were able to record this, we were able to put that together, we were able to use Grammarly, okay, to take, because their English isn't super great, and be able to massage that and put it back into a form that was better used, send it back to, to the United States, do all this in a period of time. So I think that, the use of technology, particularly in ways of communication, in order to be able to, go quicker, faster, create groups is significant. I think a lot of people are looking at things like project management software, things that they would look at and say, well, it'd be nice to do this, but now maybe we really need to do it in order to be able to take a group of people that are, we can't just all get together and get into a room. So now, that would be my thought. So I definitely don't think that's my area of strength as far as telling people using that.
But interesting, it kind of, in a sense, it is old because you have embraced very quickly technology and have not shied away from it to kind of meet those ends and meet those goals. Another question that came up, and just to follow on to this one, and totally agreed from Brett, is that execution is really the key to anything we talk about doing in planning and strategic planning. So we're going through all this and having to deal with all these unknowns. How do you really focus on execution once you get your plan sorted out? How do you think you increase your chances of being successful when it comes time to execute?
That is much more down my Bailey.
I see. It was a setup question, Michael. Come on.
Good. Thank you, John.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So the key to execution is breaking things down into small pieces. All right. Whenever we have a big plan, it's going to be more than you can deal with. And if we're in a very dynamic situation with lots of variables, there's just more than we can handle. But every plan can be broken down, right? We've got goals, we've got projects, we've got, sub-projects, we've got, tasks. And you break it down to the most common sense and the smallest pieces, and you focus on what you get done little by little. So typically when I do a plan for a client, we don't write a business plan. We create an outline, and the outline may be incredibly specific. It might be like, for example, the company I'm working with in Santa Fe. All right, call your outsourced CFO to see if we have the breakdown into gross profit analysis. That's it. Don't worry about this. All has to do with what's our most profitable lines and where we're going to invest. And we're going to sales effort. Don't worry about all that. Just get this particular task done. When we get that task done, we'll do the next task, and the next task. And by the way, this methodology is equally valid in both the crisis environment and in the planning and taking advantage environment. Because in the crisis environment, you can't deal with it. You can't let the fears get to you, as Edward said. So you really got to focus on what do I need to do now? What's the most important? What's the most urgent? Fine, do that. But as long as you put everything into a sequence and you understand how they all connect, you can let go of that because you've thought that through. You've thought through what that sequence is, where does it go, what are the things that we need to do, so that you have the freedom to just focus on the specific. And it's amazing that if you do that, how much change you can make. I've had many, many, many clients who we've had these big complex plans with multiple initiatives that we're following. And, they get overwhelmed and we say, just focus on, hey, this week we're going to do this, next week that. And they chop away. And then they'll look up in 2-3 months and say, oh my God, we've got like 60% of the plan done.
Michael, I think very helpful. Another question just came in, and we will start wrapping up in a little bit, be mindful of people's times, but I think this is a great question. Don't you, Kayla? I mean, kind of walk through this. And I think this is both a Michael and a Edward question.
I agree. So I'm just going to read it just as it's written. So I'm having trouble finding the correct words to explain to my 90 employees why we're still open despite the pandemic. We are an essential business by definition here in McKinley County. And as you can see by the news, we're being hit as hard as anyone, and they and we are confused about when money and business is more important than health. Any suggestions on how to handle that problem?
Great question. Who's starting first? Edward? I think I'm going to let you take that one first.
Michael, I've noticed you were very quiet there. Okay. I think what needs to happen first on an emotional basis is, Randy, what are you feeling about this as the leader of this company? Just emotionally, morally, what are you feeling you would be most comfortable with? I think the idea that somehow upper management doesn't care and they're all about money. I love the fact that you've written this question. This is a concern. You're not just there to make money. You're worried about yourself, your family, your employees, their families. So I think start there. In your own conscience, what do you think? I think then what dialogue can you have with upper management? Michael can talk more about the business side than I can. But I think start with what's in your gut and what is the feel about the people around you helping you run the business, and then the primary employees. And I think that there are dictates that you're essential business, but as I heard on the news a couple days ago, someone said, I don't know with the restaurants open that getting sushi is worth dying for. So you have to make that decision on your own, but you would start with your own gut.
Yeah.
Michael?
You know, there's a lot of very complicated issues that associated with that. One of which is that we have a very difficult time analyzing facts rationally in this situation. Tom, you and I have had this conversation, many times, that while this is a nasty, infection, et cetera, if you really look at the numbers and look at who is dying and what's not, that it's serious. But like I said, it's not like the the flu of 1918. It's not like cholera was a century ago. We have a different sense of mortality and what's acceptable than was maybe 50, 60, 100 years ago. So now, I wouldn't lecture my employees like this, but I might say, let's look at some facts. Let's look at some situations. Number two, I would engage people. Employee engagement's critical. If it's like, we are an essential business, okay, and this is why we're essential. This is why we're doing it. Like, let's say I'm a plumbing company, okay? So if somebody has a water main break or, something going on, so are they supposed to have like feces all through their house and, like die from something? This is why certain businesses are essential. How do we deal with this? How do we protect ourselves? What protocols do we have? And if you engage your people in that, so they are part of the solution, and they have talked through and said, well, we don't like this, but we could do it this way, and how do we do it, and what ways to do? They are now part of, okay, we've come to a consensus about how we're going to deal with this. Those would be some of the things that I would suggest.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's really up to everyone to get their comfort level. I think the other thing that I've seen two of my companies do is that they're really saying to people, if this is too scary, even though we're an essential business, if you feel too much at risk or you are more at risk given your age, your health, who you live with, we have to have exceptions that you're not going to be penalized if you don't come in. Or, there's just lots of structural things you can do. But I absolutely agree with Michael, you have to engage. This is not a top-down decision, but it has to start with top and then have everyone feel, again, the pandemic is out of our control. So whatever control we can get, and even the steps to accomplishment are small, concrete steps, that gives people the sense, rightly so, that something's getting done. So engagement is everything. I agree.
Great. I hope that answered your question. And then we had one more come in, and we have a couple minutes, so we'll go ahead and address it. So Ronald would like our thoughts about the current situation as an opportunity for business owners to use these times as a teaching moment for family successors. So, capability, commitment, character, all of those things. And so anybody that would like to jump in, please do.
Well, I can tell you, Tom alluded to my venture in Ghana where we managed to survive. We went from a week time where we thought we were going to shut down. We weren't even going to be able to start, and then, use technology, et cetera, to create ourselves virtually. But I've been working, this is not a family business, but it's the same whenever you're dealing with anybody. So these are young ladies who have not had much opportunity in life. And so to be able to talk to them, and they're working and they're now doing that, to recognize, like, and particularly with them doing these conversations with our Jumpstart professionals, where they're listening to people talk about how bad things are here in the US, and saying, like, now, do you appreciate the opportunity you have? Now, this isn't a given. You need to work on this. You need to go and, make the commitment of this. And they've responded incredibly well in this way. And I would say my fellow professionals have done the same thing. There's been an awful lot of talk where they're not immune to the, to the fear. Their business, their practices are down as well. And, being able to look at these things and saying, like, yes, but by doing and by being proactive and by being engaged, we can see where we're going to make a difference and where things are going to happen.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think that, what they look at in succession with the next generation is two things go horribly wrong. One is that you come home from your family business and you only complain about your day. So all of your children go, I never want to go in that business. And then you also say to them, you can do whatever you want, and you undersell the business, and you end up with no second generation or third or fourth. The other thing is to make it look magical. We make a lot of money, we go to work, we don't sweat, and it just happens. Here's an opportunity where you can come home and say, these are the things that are happening that's very scary. And these are the things I'm facing and we're facing as a business. Now, here are the creative things that we're thinking about. What would you suggest? How do we get out of this? They say we're an essential business, but I'm worried about my employees. It's very scary for me. Can we think creatively? So they can see problem solving within the family business as an opportunity to be creative and to survive together. So it's very exciting stuff if you allow it, but don't make it look too easy, and don't make it look like your life is hell if you're in a family business. You're going to scare off the successors.
Kayla, I don't know if we have enough time.
We have 3 minutes, so you.
Okay, I'm going to
Thanks,
give you an
Michael.
example. I heard a talk at my Rotary Club from a woman by the name of Ari Harrigan. She runs the Rio Grande Food Pantry. And, you know, this is an essential business. You know, people need food. And to listen to how she had gone through problem solving and going from having a physical distribution to now doing distribution via cars coming through and partnering up with the Rio Grande Food Bank and on and on and on. I mean, this is a person who has taken what could have been a death blow to their mission and completely transformed it into a positive thing. And yes, they have risk. Yes, they're dealing with people, whatever, but their staff is highly motivated. You know, their volunteers are coming in, are highly motivated because they feel that, okay, we've got a mission, we know what we're doing, we know how important this is, we know that our management is doing everything they can do to take care of us. I mean, they've got phenomenal esprit de corps, despite being in exactly the same situation that we're in an essential business, we're being put at risk, etc. So yeah, I think it can be an incredibly positive thing, so long as the management understands what you need to do to be safe, what you need to do to operate, and reduce the risk, engage your people, and make sure they understand what the mission is and why it's important.
Great.
Transparency really is the key here.
Right.
And if that's what your family believes, that if you're transparent, bad things are going to happen, you're not going to do it. But as Michael and I are both saying, it is key to surviving this.
Great. Awesome. I have just a quick thought as a next gen in a position, right, of thinking, okay, yeah, what a great opportunity. So this constant thought process that I think next gens feel of not feeling like they were a part of building the business and maybe not feeling worthy. It's like, this is an opportunity for them to be a part of building with their founder or the other generation. And so I think that taking that opportunity to really engage them in the conversation and to consciously bring to the front of your brain, Kathy Wiseman would be so proud of me, but to consciously bring to the front, the intentionality of conscious competence, how you know what you're doing for so long, but now we actually are going to share that out loud with the next generation so we can bring them along. And that's exciting for both parties. And so just a thought from my perspective.
Great point.
Generation.
Great point. Yep.
Great.
Well said, Kayla.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are about out of time. So I want to thank everybody for coming. But first, I want to thank Michael and Dr. Monte for taking the time to share some wisdom with us and some things. And I'm very, very grateful that we can share this. We had a lot of people attending, and I'm excited about that. If you want a copy of the webinar, we are recording this, and we're going to get it up on the website as soon as we can. And we can send that link out. And so just be aware of that. And then our next webinar, so we're going to actually spend some time getting some stories from the trenches of family business in this time. And that's going to be on May 24th from 11:30 to 12:30. So look for that invitation. Make sure you share it with other people who might be interested in doing that. And then also, just something to consider is being a member of the Parker Center. You get access to a lot of us and some of these great speakers. And so something to think about, and you can do that on the website as well. So thank you all so much for taking the time today to be with us and for your amazing questions. And I am really grateful that you did that. So thank you all so much. And we are done.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
We all wave goodbye.
Bye.
Oh, there we are. Hi, guys.
There it is. Yeah, it's cool. That
Well,
was
that was
great.
fun.
The